Hello, welcome to the Knit Shift, episode 22. My name is Laura, and today is Thursday, August 27th, 2015. If you're new here, welcome. This is a knitting podcast. I am joined by my canine co-host, Gracie, who is sitting right here. Maybe she'll poke her head up and say hello. I talk about knitting, I talk about yarn, talk a little bit about my life. So thanks for coming back if you're returning, and welcome if you're new. Show notes can be found at thenitshift.com. We have a Ravelry group if you do a search for the Knit Shift. I'm on Ravelry as Yarn Stormer, and I am on Instagram as Laura Mahalski, so just send me a request. You'll know it's me from my bio. We have a knit along, just a few days left actually, going on over in the Ravelry group for baby knits. Basically, if you have had a baby knit in progress since January 1st, you can feel free to submit it if it's done by August 31st, which is next Monday. Baby sweaters, baby blankets, toddler clothes, that kind of stuff all counts. If you knit socks, though, I ask that you enter multiple pairs for a single entry. So each post is a different entry. We have 3 prizes to hand out, and I have decided to do them separately. Last week I mentioned that I was trying to decide how to combine them, and I think in the interest of more prizes for more people, I'm going to spread it out and have 3 prizes to hand out. So the prizes are a skein of yarn, Malabrigo Machita, which is a single ply fingering weight, in a beautiful blue-green colorway. I'm Arequita, that's the colorway name. We have a lovely project bag donated by Knitty Kitty Designs on Etsy, so thank you to the owner of Knitty Kitty for that lovely donation. It's a great bag for a small project. And finally, we have a needle keeper, which is a handy little device to keep your stitches on your needles when you're carrying a project around. So they're modest prizes, but I would rather increase people's chances of winning a prize than combine them. So I hope the winners enjoy when it comes time to pick them. I will close the thread on Ravelry on Monday evening after work. Wait, I don't work Mondays anymore. I'll close it right around midnight Monday night and draw the prizes. Probably, I don't know if I'll do it in advance or if I'll do it live on the podcast when I film next Thursday. So we'll see how that plays out. So we have well over 75 entries, and next week I think I will tally them all up and see just how many items were made. You know, there were 13 blankets and 4 sweaters and 5 hats, that kind of thing. So it's actually, I have a feeling hats were the biggest component of this. I think people made a lot of hats, so stay tuned. So this episode we're going to talk about a few things. I have a lot of progress on my works in progress, though I have no finished objects to share with you. I probably won't for a little while. I'm kind of in a place on my projects that I just have a ways to go, so it'll be a little while till I have an FO. I'm going to answer a question from a viewer, and I'm going to share a hot off the press pattern that I just came across minutes ago. So let's get right to it, shall we? I have 2 works in progress to share with you this week. Normally I would share my pie shawl progress because it's an even-numbered episode, but I haven't touched my pie shawl since my trip to New York, which was, it was almost a month ago already. I can't believe it. So no pie shawl update today. My first thing to share with you is a little asymmetrical scarf, shawl, wrap, whatever you want to call it, that I've been knitting for a couple weeks now. I'm carrying it around in this little dumpling bag. This is from the Knitting Addiction, which is a shop in Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina. I don't know who makes it. I know they sell them there. I think it's someone local, but I really like this cute little triangle bag, and next time I go down there I really want to go and buy another one because this has gotten so much use, and the inside of it is lined with brown polka dots, which is pretty fun. So it's the perfect size for a small pair of socks or a little shawl. So I have made some progress since last week. Sorry, I'm hitting the microphone with my needles, so hopefully it's not clanging too much. And I apologize if the lighting isn't great today. It's really cloudy out, and I've set up some lamps around me, but I'm afraid it'll still be a little dark, so I hope it's not too hard for you to see stuff. So this stitch marker is where I was last week. So you can see I've done a couple more repeats of the pattern, and it's a stockinette garter repeat. There's basically 2 different sections that you repeat in a certain order, and it's very easy to know where you are. So I'm really enjoying it. It's very simple. This is my first asymmetrical shawl, and I'm loving the way the yarn is knitting up. This is Malabrigo Machita, which is, like I mentioned before about the prize, it's a single ply sock yarn, single ply fingering weight yarn. I wouldn't use this for socks. Because it is a single ply, it just will not hold up as well as a plied yarn. Do that so you can kind of see. Yeah, it's a little fuzzy too, so I like it. It's kind of a thick fingering weight. I would say it's more like sport weight. It's not thick and thin, it's just a very solid fingering weight. But I'm using the colorway Diana, which is pinks and greens and oranges and a little bit of yellows, and it doesn't look very pink in the cake, but when I hold up this, it looks so pink to me. So hopefully you can see the colors okay, but I'm really loving this. There's even little blips of kind of a dusty purple here and there, which I really enjoy. So I'm enjoying this quite a bit. I haven't been working on this. I worked on it over my weekend, which is Sunday, Monday, but I've really been focusing on my sweater, which is the other thing I have to show you. So that's one work in progress. Oh, and I'm sorry, I'm knitting these on, I believe, I'm knitting these on a size 7, which I believe is a 4.5 millimeter. These are my Knit Picks. Yes, they are. I can see the little number on the needle here. These are Knit Picks interchangeables. You know, a few years ago, Knit Picks needles were not the best. The join between, not even the join where you connect the different needles here, where the little hole is, this was fine, but the cord where it meets the metal would always be really loose. But I think they've gotten a lot better about, I don't know if they've changed their manufacturer or what, but they've become a lot sturdier. And I will say, to Knit Picks' credit, they would be very good about sending you replacement cords if you mentioned that they broke. But I have had to super glue the purple bit into the metal before to get it to stick, because you know the last thing you want when you've got a really big project and you've got hundreds of stitches smashed up on the needle, the last thing you want is for this thing to break right here and your stitches fall off. It's a nightmare. So to Knit Picks' credit, it's much better about that. And the other work in progress I have to show you is my Mama Vertebrae cardigan. Oh, and I just realized, I'm sorry, I forgot to mention who designs, what the pattern is that I'm knitting, that asymmetrical shawl. It's called Sailing, and it's by Meg Gadsby, and it's a $6 pattern that calls for either 1 skein of sock yarn or, I believe, about 500 yards of DK weight. So apologies for not mentioning that sooner. So my sweater, I'm carrying this around in the most designer of bags, a store brand generic Ziploc bag, very chic. It's all the rage. All the knitters are carrying their projects in these days. Wind up this little cake here, and I am using my needle keeper on this. This keeps your stitches on. There's this little, it looks like a magic wand, but there's this little slit here where you put your needles in, and it keeps your stitches safe while you carry it around. So I am still on the body, and I probably have an hour's worth of knitting before I'm done with the body of the sweater, because I'm on the edging already. So it's a little hard to see, but that orange stitch marker is where I was last week. And so I have knit probably a good 4 or 5 inches on the body, and then I switched to seed stitch and a smaller needle on the edging. And I'll hold that up more closely so you can see the seed stitch. I've never put a seed stitch border on anything, and I'm really, really loving it. And I have almost 2 inches done right now, and I might bind off on the next row. It hits me at a good spot on my hips, and the sooner I bind off, the sooner I can start the sleeves, and I'm really motivated to finish this. I want it to be done by the end of October. I have 2 months. I have no excuse not to. Famous last words, I know. But I'm really excited about this sweater. It's gonna be just a really really versatile piece. You know, it's gray, it's a lovely sweatshirt color. This yarn is Stonehenge Fiber Mill shepherd's wool. It's a really lovely heathery gray. I believe it's all American grown, American spun, and this is a really nice, reasonably priced alternative to Cascade 220. It might be a little bit more than Cascade 220, but not by much, maybe $1. And each skein has 250 yards, so really, if you're paying a little bit more than Cascade 220, you do get 30 extra yards, so it's really comparable price. So I really am enjoying this quite a bit. So yeah, so those are my 2 works in progress. My lamp here is falling as I set my sweater down on I film on the ottoman of my chair here, so it's not the most sturdy of surfaces. Pardon me, I'm going to get a sip of water. Okay, so what does that bring us to? Oh, and I have had a pair of socks on the needles that I didn't show you last week. They've been living in my purse, I just haven't touched them, so no update on that front either. And if I didn't mention it, Mama Vertebrae is a $4 pattern by Kelly Brooker. It is super versatile in terms of if you want to knit a sweater out of fingering weight, sport weight, light worsted, heavy worsted, and it has a range of sizes. So I think it's 4 or 5 weights and a good 7 or 8 sizes. So it's a really good deal considering that you're paying only $4 for this pattern. And it's a cardigan with no front to it. It just kind of comes right here. It is by the same designer of the Newborn Vertebrae, if you're familiar with that baby pattern. So this brings us to, I have no spinning. I think I'm going to get back into it in the fall. I'm really eager. I see my friends hand spinning on Instagram and I think, oh, that looks so good. Oh man, I want to do that. I think the fall will be a good time to get back into it. So that brings us to yarns. I'm really trying not to buy much yarn these days. I had a trip to New York. I had Maryland Sheep and Wool where I bought yarn. So I'm really trying to wait until I go to SAF in North Carolina in 2 months. But a friend of mine was destashing some yarn and she had this beautiful skein of sock yarn and it was like $10 with shipping, and I thought, meh, I'm gonna throw my pledge out the window because this is pretty. And it's a brand I had never heard of before. This is Actual Size Creations sock yarn, and it's a superwash merino, 400 yards, fingering weight, and it feels very woolly. Like if you look at the ply, I don't know if it's easy to tell, but it feels like a very loftily spun yarn. It's a nice twist on it, but it just feels very woolly to me. And the colorway is Jenna Pink Monkey, and it almost in the skein looks like an ombre. I know that it will be variegated, it won't actually be a self-striping, but I just loved the way it looked in the skein and decided to bite the bullet. So I did. So we'll see what that becomes. But that's it for stash enhancement. So that means next up is a Q&A. I got a question on the Ravelry boards from Anita, who is Tesoro Stitchery on Ravelry. She says, you are an inspirational sock knitter. Can you suggest your favorite sock pattern or share your own recipe? Well, thank you, Anita. That's very nice of you to say. I do love to knit socks, although this past 6 months since I started the podcast, I have not knit as many socks as I used to, but If you look at my Ravelry page, you'll see I probably have about 120 pairs of socks over the past, 8 years, 9 years, thereabouts. So I do love to knit them. I can tell you what worked for me, and what I think could work for others. I picked up the book Knitting Rules by Stephanie Pearl McPhee back in 2006. I had been reading her blog, and she just talked about her sock knitting with such vigor that she just kept churning out these socks, and they were so gorgeous, and I thought, I really want to learn how to knit those. So that book had just come out, and she provided her sock recipe, which I believe is available on Ravelry for free if you look up Stephanie Pearl McPhee, and I believe it's called something like a good basic sock or a vanilla sock, that kind of thing. And by the way, I take issue with the term vanilla sock because I think when you have a really gorgeous sock yarn, there's nothing vanilla about that if you just knit a sock and stockinette. I think that really makes the yarn sing, so I will try and refrain from using the term vanilla sock. But Knitting Rules has a very detailed explanation of how she knits her socks, and it's not a typical knitting pattern where it talks about gauge, and it's a very chatty instructional type of pattern, which I kind of enjoy. It's not chatty in the way that if you've read an Elizabeth Zimmerman book, she can be a little vague. Chatty but vague, I find. But Stephanie's chatty instructions are quite detailed. And she usually knits socks cuff down, which is how I learned. However, if you are familiar, I learned cuff down on double pointed needles. I don't remember if I used 5 needles total or if I used 4 needles total. I think I mostly use 4 needles total, where you have the sock is a triangle, and then you use the 4th needle to knit with. So I learned cuff down. I learned how to do a slip stitch heel, which is what this kind of heel is, and it's a little bit thicker, and it's is this a slip stitch heel? Yes, this is. A slip stitch heel it has slip stitches on it, no duh, but it makes it a thicker heel, which will wear a little bit better and last a little longer, theoretically, when it rubs on the back of your shoe. Now that I've been knitting a while, I did learn how to do toe up, which is now my preferred method, and I now prefer to knit magic loop, which is where you have a really long circular needle and manipulate it in a way that the sock is on the needle, like just one needle. You don't need 2 needles, you don't need double points. That is fastest for me. I prefer toe up because I wear a size 11 shoe, and everyone in my family has big feet, so I prefer toe up because then I can knit the foot and then I can go as tall as I want to on the leg. So and I like to knit 2 at a time socks now as well. They take a little longer, of course, but I just think the payoff of finishing the whole project at once is really great, and then you don't have any second sock syndrome. So all of that is a very long-winded path to say I knit socks many ways, but if you are new to knitting socks, I highly recommend Stephanie Pearl McPhee's book, and I will tell you my preferred sock recipe. So I brought a few things to show you out of my sock drawer, and I can't remember if I showed this on a previous episode, but this is the first sock I ever knit. It never ended up being a pair. In fact, Stephanie Pearl McPhee actually got to see this sock in person. I went to her book signing in Northern Virginia, and the reason this sock never had a mate is because I don't know if this will show up super well. So here's the bottom, like I'm showing you the bottom of the sock foot here. So it all looks great, here's the heel, here's the bottom of the foot. Look at this ridiculous toe. Yeah, that's Stephanie Pearl McPhee said, "Oh, you have a cloven toe on your sock." And I said, that is the perfect description of it. So yes, this toe, what happened was, you're going down the foot and you've got X number of stitches on the top half, X number of stitches on the bottom half, and let's say 30 and 30. But after I had done the heel flap, I had 20, 20, and 20. So it wasn't an even split between top and bottom. So as I did the decreases on the toe, it just got totally warped from having stitches on random needles. It wasn't, as I came down the foot, it didn't even occur to me that I needed the same number of stitches on top and bottom. So I've come a long way since the cloven-toed sock. But if I may also give one more piece of advice before I explain my recipe, it would be to use a smaller needle than you think you need to. I'm not someone who swatches for gauge for socks. I basically start the toe and work my way up. But if I don't like the fabric I'm getting, I will change my needle size and see if I like that. I find that tighter is better because if you've got tiny needles and you've got tiny stitches, there's less air and less friction that gets between those stitches, because that air and that friction is what leads it to felt and wear out. So if you knit your sock really open, your stitches will be more open and all that air can get in between and it will just wear out a lot faster. It can felt more easily, and moreover, socks loosen up over time. They don't get tighter, they don't shrink. Unless you wash them in hot water and dry them on high, and it's not super wash and it'll felt and become like a toddler sock. But if you knit a sock tightly, it will loosen up slightly over time and still fit you perfectly. I have a pair that I think exemplifies this. I knit these 2x2 rib socks on a size 1 needle like 5 years ago. Let me think about this. It was a good 5 years ago because I visited a friend. These came on the bus with me to Washington, D.C., and my friend was pregnant with her now 4-year-old. So these are almost 5 years old. But I knit these on a size 1 needle, and they still look as good as the day I knit them. These socks were tight for a while. I would put them on, and at the top, it would just be a little too snug on my foot, but they've loosened up now to the point where they fit me perfectly. I love them. They're some of my favorite socks. And if you look at the bottom here, like where the heel turn is, they have worn very remarkably well. There's very little felting or pilling. Let me turn this in a way that is a little easier to see. If anything, the color has worn out a little right here on the heel turn, but the heel flap looks great. So this was a case where really tight gauge helped quite a bit because it adds to the longevity of your socks. Alternatively, I have a pair that I knit. These are newer socks. These are younger socks than the purpley blue ones I just showed you, but they are so worn because I knit them on too big of a needle. So you can see right now it's like a really big sock. It's really wide. The heel turn, so the heel flap is a slip stitch heel, and it's felting here at the bottom of the heel. And the actual heel turn itself, it's just so felted and fuzzy. And that's because I used a really big needle, and these socks don't stay up on me. You can see the ribbing is like the same width as the sock. These sag, they aren't great. I keep them just because I don't see the point in getting rid of socks that are a little too baggy on me. I'm sentimental, I suppose. I bought this yarn. It's funny how you always think about where you bought the yarn or what you were doing when you bought the yarn or when you were knitting them. Like, I bought this yarn in St. Louis over Memorial Day weekend in 2010, and knit these soon after. So these are probably less than a year. These are probably 4 years old if the other socks I just showed you were 5 years old. I bought these at a yarn store in St. Louis. My mom and I took a trip to Missouri. I am named after Laura Ingalls Wilder, the writer, not the TV show. So I'm Laura Elizabeth, like Laura Ingalls Wilder, and my mom and I took the trip of a lifetime to go to Rocky Ridge Farm in Springfield, Missouri. And we flew into St. Louis and had a wonderful, wonderful weekend that included trips to at least 2 yarn stores, maybe 3, I can't remember. But this was one of the purchases I made that weekend from a local dyer. Anyway, my sock recipe would be to cast on, I prefer Magic Loop. I like size 1 needles, 1.5 perhaps if it's a little bit thicker. I like Chiagu needles. And I cast on 16 stitches per needle, so you have 16 and 16. I cast on with Judy's Magic Cast On. I increase every round for about 5 rounds until I get to 48 stitches total. So I increase every round, and that makes a nice round toe. And then I go to then I change it and I increase every 3rd round. So once I get to 48 stitches, I knit 2 rounds plain, and then I do the increases in the corner to go to 52 stitches. Then I knit 2 more rounds and I increase to 56. Then I knit 2 rounds and then I increase to 60. And really the number of stitches depends on your foot. If you have a wide foot, you'll want to keep going. I generally like my socks to have about 64 stitches or 68 stitches. Hi, Grace. Gracie is sleeping beside me on the chair. And she just sat up and looked at me and put her head back down. So I'm probably disturbing her in her beauty sleep. We had a nice WALK this morning. It's only about 75 degrees out, and we walked for about 25 minutes, and it was really lovely. But I digress. So I increase until I get about 64 or 68 stitches. I really like the Fish Lips Kiss Heel. I have another sock to show that. The Fish Lips Kiss Heel does not require a gusset, so you basically knit the foot as a tube and then you start the heel, which I like. And it's a short row heel. It's a paid for pattern. It's $1. And then you carry on up the leg after you do the Fish Lips Kiss Heel. Sometimes you might need to increase in the leg of the sock a little bit if you have a really big calf. If you have thicker ankles, that kind of thing. And then I switch to ribbing. I don't change the needle size. I don't do anything differently. I like 2x2 ribbing. The Yarn Harlot says 2x2 ribbing stays up the best on your leg. And 1x1 looks the prettiest, but it doesn't stay up as well as 2x2 rib. And I tend to agree with her. So I like 2x2 rib. I do at least 3 inches to have because when you do ribbing, it stretches this way, so it gets shorter as you stretch it out this way. So you need a little more length than you think you do, so that when it stretches out, it stays nice and snug. And then I bind off with either a Russian bind off or Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off, which I believe is what I did here. And that's my sock recipe, basically. I like the Fish Lips Kiss Heel a lot, but I find that a gusset and heel flap style fit me better. And that's what this is, a gusset. Whether it's top down, cuff down, or toe up, I find that the gusset fits me a little bit better. And the gusset is, if you're going toe up, you go until you're about 3 inches from the heel, and then you increase on each side of the bottom of the foot and add stitches to account for your instep that's wider. Then you do the heel turn, then you do the heel turn, then the heel flap, and you carry on up the leg. And to do it this way, toe up, there are not, I don't believe, any sort of instructions out there, like generic instructions. I have just kind of taken a mishmash of patterns that I've seen or patterns that I've used and kind of made my own Franken pattern, I guess you could say, for this. But it's very easy to do cuff down, knit the leg, knit the heel flap on half the stitches, do the heel turn, pick up stitches for the gusset, and you do decreases down the gusset and carry on down to the toe, where you would Kitchener stitch. I just prefer toe up because once I get above here, it's just a tube the rest of the way. And, you know, when you go cuff down, you have to think about the heel flap, think about the turn, think about the gusset, and then keep trying it on to see where you need to start the toe. So that's just not my cup of tea. I would much rather do it toe up. So I spoke a little breezily about that. If you aren't familiar with sock construction, I'm sorry. It might not have been as beginner as some people might have liked, but if you know stuff about sock knitting, then hopefully it made sense. And I hope that helps, Anita, so thank you for your question. So, what next? Oh, this brings us to the final segment, odds and ends. I am super ready for fall. I am wearing a fall dress today, despite the fact that it's still summer. I'm wearing plum lipstick, even though it's still summer. I'm just plowing ahead with the idea that we're finally in fall, even though it's still, you know, we've got forecasts in the 90s coming up. So it's been a busy week. My boyfriend, who I'd mentioned before, was going back to school. He started school Monday and has been really busy already, and I've been busy with my new job, which I'm now in week 2 of. It's been, and if you're new here, I'm an editor at a news organization. I just started a new job where I'm in charge of planning and organizing the print paper. So more responsibility. I'll eventually manage people again, that kind of stuff. So yesterday was, of course, the awful shooting in Virginia on the other side of the state from me. I did not know the 2 young adults who were killed, the cameraman and the reporter, but that just doesn't change the fact that it was just really, really awful day for people in the news business, because we don't get killed in the line of work often, especially in this country. It just doesn't happen. So it's just really, really tragic, and everyone just had a cloud over their heads yesterday because it's just so sickening what happened. But that's all I'll say about that. Other than that, it's been an okay week around here. I was able to hang out with a friend on Sunday evening. Was that Sunday? Yes, it was Sunday evening. A knitting friend, and we knit together and played with her kiddo. That was fun. If you follow me on Instagram, you will see that I posted these photos of about 30 cakes in my newsroom. Every summer, the food writer at my newspaper, she kind of had this idea that our region was not well represented at the state fair in terms of the baking competition. So she decided to start a dream team, and she would take the baked goods for the people up to the state fair for them and try and bring home the blue ribbons for Hampton Roads, which is Tidewater, Virginia, which is where we live. So every year she focuses on a new category. One year it's cakes, one year it's pies, one year it's cookies. I can't remember what other categories there have been, but it's always been sweets. Oh, one year it was breads, quick breads, any type of bread. So this year she was back to cakes for the first time since she started. So we have a competition to qualify for the dream team. So the writer she accepts, I think, 7 or 8, maybe 10 people for each category. So there were so many cakes, they had to split up the judging into 2 days, basically. So on Saturday, she had pound cake, iced pound cake, coconut cake, devil's food cake, yellow cake with chocolate icing, and I know I've cake with caramel icing. At least 7 or 8 categories and 7 or 8 cakes per category. And after the judges are done and after the people sample the cakes, the newsroom gets the cakes. We get to eat all of the cake, and it's amazing. So Saturday was the first day of competition, and that was the day I worked. And I ate cake for dinner, which was both an amazing and an awful choice, because in the moment it tastes so good. You just feel like a little kid eating all of the cake. And then, like, once the sugar sets in, and like an hour or two, like many hours later, and you realize you haven't had a decent bite of food, you have the cake regret. So that was me on Saturday, but it was awesome. I regret nothing. Then on Sunday was round 2, and Sunday's my day off, but Sunday was carrot cake, which I love. I love carrot cake, and youth devil's food cake, and German chocolate cake. I'm not a big coconut fan. I'll eat coconut in carrot cake, but I don't care for German chocolate cake. I went in on my day off just to have a couple pieces of carrot cake and a couple bites. Honestly, when we have this food, you can't eat multiple pieces of cake. You take a sliver or a bite, you just carve off a tiny little piece for each cake, because that way you get to sample more, and it ends up being like a large piece of cake in the end is what you've eaten altogether. So, Sunday, I took a piece of carrot cake and I took a piece of devil's food cake, and I took it to my friend's house where we ate it, and it was delicious. So there was a lot of cake in my life this weekend, and it was fantastic. And as for other food stuff, I mentioned that I've been trying to cook more and come home for dinner, and I have had success with that. I'm finding that the crock pot is key. I can't come home and cook and then go back to work. It really has to be ready when I walk in the door. So, and my boyfriend, bless him, he's not a cook. So I love cooking. I love the prepping, all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of my forte. So we defrosted some carnitas that I had cooked about a month ago and reheated it in the crock pot and had tacos last night, which was fantastic. And on Monday night, I made a really delicious pasta meal with kale and red walnuts and toasted breadcrumbs and pecorino cheese, and I'll link to that recipe in the show notes because it was so delicious, and I highly recommend it. And it's not even 11 o'clock yet, but I'm really looking forward to having that for dinner. Having that for lunch, leftovers. So, and that brings me to the final bit, which was the pattern of the week. I didn't think this was going to be a long episode, and here it is, almost 40 minutes. So this pattern I found, I just saw on my Instagram feed. It's a fingering weight pullover by Alicia Plummer. It's called Uncomplicated, and it's $6.50, but right now, if you use the coupon code RELAX, you'll get half off, so it'll only be $3.25. So let me pull up the photo here. I just think this is so lovely. It's a pale green on her. It's got a little pattern, a little pocket on the chest. Very simple V-neck. It comes in, how many sizes? 1, 2, 3, 5 sizes, from a 30-inch bust to a 46-inch bust. And it requires anywhere from 1,000 to about 1,900 yards of yarn. Fingering weight, like I said. So I think it was just released today or yesterday, so that would be my pattern of the week that I found that I thought was really lovely. And I believe that is it for the end of the episode today. So thanks for hanging around. This was a longer episode than normal, and I hope you have a fantastic weekend. I guess it is almost the weekend now that it's Thursday. Lots of knitting, lots of crafting time, and I'll see you next week. Bye.